"He's just a confused old man," my son whispered to his wife after seizing our $10 million estate while I was in the hospital. They thought their future was secure, built on my life's work. But in my late wife's nightstand, tucked inside her old diary, I found a faded medical document, the results of a single blood test, a secret that would prove their entire life was a lie. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're listening from in the comments. I sit here in the living room, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the hardwood floor, and I look out at the farm. My farm. 520 acres of land that my family has worked for 4 generations. The silence in this house is a heavy thing, a physical weight. It wasn't always this quiet. This house used to be filled with the sounds of a life being lived, the slam of a screen door, the laughter of a boy, the gentle humming of my wife Eleanor as she worked in her kitchen. Now, all I hear is the steady, mournful tick of the grandfather clock in the hall, and my own thoughts. Those are the loudest sounds of all. I remember the day we drove Kevin to college. I'd just withdrawn $40,000 from my 401k, a sum that felt staggering, a huge chunk of the future Eleanor and I had carefully planned. But as I handed over the check, I saw the excitement in Kevin's eyes, and it felt worth it. It felt like an investment in his future, our legacy. A few years later, another $20,000 for his first car, a shiny Ford Mustang he'd dreamed of. We never took that trip to the Grand Canyon Eleanor always wanted. We told ourselves we'd go next year, and then the year after that. Those years never came. Our vacations were spent fixing fences and harvesting crops. Our fancy dinners were the casseroles Eleanor made from scratch, stretching every dollar. We ate beans and rice more times than I can count, not because we were poor, but because we were building something. We wore worn-out boots, so he could wear brand-name sneakers. We sacrificed our dreams so he could chase his. The ingratitude. It's not like a clean knife wound. It's a slow-acting poison, spreading through every memory, tainting everything it touches. This wasn't just about money. It was about a lifetime of putting him first, only to be seen as an obstacle in his path, an old man to be managed. This farm isn't just an asset on a balance sheet valued at $3.8 million. It's a living history. I look at the great oak tree by the creek, its branches thick and sprawling. I can still see Kevin as a 5-year-old, climbing too high, scraping his knee on the way down, and running to me with tears streaming down his face. I picked him up, held him tight, and told him he was brave. Right over there by the porch is where Eleanor's rose garden used to be. She spent hours out there, her hands covered in dirt, a wide-brimmed hat shielding her from the sunday. Every single rose bush was a testament to her patience and love. This land holds the echo of our lives. But now, when I look at it, the happiness of those memories is tainted. It's like looking at an old photograph through a dirty window. The image is there, but it's distorted, smeared by the filth of betrayal. On the mantel sits our wedding photograph. Eleanor and I, so young, so full of hope. For 40 years, that picture was a symbol of our partnership, our shared life. Now, it's a monument to a lie I didn't even know I was living in. The love is still there, but it's tangled with a new, sharp pain. How could the boy who took his first steps on this lawn sell it without a second thought? How could he and his wife laugh and post pictures from the Maldives, celebrating with champagne paid for by erasing our history? This room, once filled with the warmth of family dinners and Christmas mornings, now feels like a cold, empty museum of a life that was stolen from me. The silence isn't peaceful. It's the sound of absence, the sound of betrayal. The stillness of the house began to feel suffocating, each tick of the clock a hammer blow against my sanity. I needed to move, to do something, anything, to feel like I still had some control over my own life. I decided to start with the attic, to finally go through Eleanor's things. It was a task I'd been dreading, but now it felt necessary. The air upstairs was thick with the scent of cedar and thyme. Dust motes danced in the single beam of light from the small window. In the far corner, tucked beneath an old patchwork quilt she'd made, was the small wooden box. Her memory box. She always kept it locked, and I never asked what was inside. It was hers. I found the small key in her jewelry case downstairs. My hand trembled as I put it in the lock. It turned with a soft click. I lifted the lid, expecting to find old love letters, dried flowers, maybe a few photographs. But that's not what was inside. There was a single, yellowed envelope with my name, Arthur, written in her familiar, elegant script. Beneath it, another official-looking document. A birth certificate. I picked it up first. The name of the child was Kevin, but the surname wasn't Vance, and the space for the father's name was left blank. My blood ran cold. I unfolded the letter. "My dearest Arthur," it began, "if you are reading this, it means I am gone, and I have taken my secrets with me. I am so sorry. I loved you more than anything. But I was young, and I was scared. Kevin is not your son." The words blurred. The air left my lungs in a single ragged gasp. The attic seemed to tilt, the floor falling away from beneath me. This was a new kind of pain, a double pain. The grief for my wife was now compounded by the agony of a 40-year deception. This boy, this man I had raised, loved, sacrificed everything for, was not my own. The box wasn't a collection of memories. It was a weapon, a truth she had hidden, perhaps to protect me, perhaps to protect herself. But now, it was my truth, and it would be my justice. The shock was a physical thing, a crushing weight that pinned me to the floor of the attic. But as the minutes stretched into an hour, the shock began to recede, replaced by a cold, hard clarity I hadn't felt in years. How could I have been so blind? All the signs were there. The subtle distance, the way Kevin never quite looked like me, the desperate way Eleanor sometimes showered him with affection, as if to make up for something. I had been a fool, a loving, trusting fool. I sat there, blaming myself. Maybe I gave too much. Maybe I made it too easy for him. I thought I was buying him a better life. But maybe, in his eyes, I was just buying his affection. I had raised him, but I hadn't taught him the one thing that truly mattered. Character. My mind drifted, strangely, to Frank Miller's granddaughter, Sarah. Just a teenager, but she worked on her family's farm every day after school. Last summer, she won the blue ribbon at the county fair for her prize heifer. I remember seeing the pride on her face, the genuine love she had for the animal she'd raised. She understood the value of hard work, of earning something. She was everything Kevin was not. The boy I thought was my son saw legacy as a burden and inheritance as a right. He never understood that the real inheritance wasn't the land or the money. It was the values, the respect, the integrity. This realization didn't bring me more pain. It brought me focus. My fight was no longer just about a piece of property. It was about righting a wrong that had been allowed to fester for 4 decades. It was about honoring the man I had tried to be, even if I was living in a lie. They thought I was a weak, confused old man. They were about to discover just how wrong they were. Before I went to the attic, while I was still sitting in the grip of that initial raw anger, my phone buzzed on the end table. A text message. It was from Kevin. The screen lit up with his name, a name that now felt like a lie. The message read, "Just checking in, Dad. Hope you're doing okay." The hypocrisy of it was breathtaking. Checking in. As if he hadn't just ripped the heart out of my life and sold it to the lowest bidder. My first instinct was to type back a message filled with rage, to let loose all the venom that was coursing through my veins. But I stopped. I looked at his name on the screen, Kevin. I pressed my thumb down on the contact, and a menu appeared. I didn't hesitate. I hit delete contact. The name vanished. It was a small, quiet act, but it felt monumental. It was the first step in taking back my life. The pain of what he did, what they both did, felt like a hollow space where my heart used to be, a cold void that ached with every breath. I had given him my name, my home, my life's work, and my unconditional love. In return, he had given me his contempt. He saw me not as his father, but as a bank account with a failing heart, an obstacle to be removed. Well, the obstacle was about to become a mountain he could not move. I finally came down from the attic. The small wooden box held tightly in my hands. The house felt different now. It was no longer a tomb of memories, but a silent stage, waiting for the final act of a long-running play. I walked into my study and placed the box on the great oak desk Eleanor had bought me for our 10th anniversary. The grandfather clock in the hall chimed 7 times. Its steady ticking no longer sounded like a countdown to my own end. Now, it sounded like a countdown for them. The shadows in the room were long, but for the first time in months, I didn't feel like I was one of them. The grief was still there, a dull ache that would likely never leave. But now, it was joined by something else. A fire. A cold, controlled fire of purpose. I looked at the contents of the box again. The letter, the birth certificate. This wasn't about revenge. Revenge was a hot, messy emotion. This was about consequences. It was about truth. I picked up the old photograph of Eleanor from my desk. I looked into her smiling eyes. "I understand now, Eleanor," I whispered to the silence. "I don't know why you did it, but I know what I have to do now. I'll make it right. I would not let the legacy we built, even the parts of it that were a lie, be destroyed by greed and deceit. The game they thought they had won was only just beginning, and I was about to change all the rules." If you're still watching and find this story interesting, please comment 1 below to let me know you're here with me. The next morning I woke before the Sunday. For the first time since Eleanor passed, the grief wasn't the first thing that greeted me. It was replaced by a cold, clear purpose. The storm of emotion had passed, leaving behind a hard, unyielding resolve. I made coffee, the strong black kind I used to drink before the doctors told me to cut back. Today, I needed it. I sat at the kitchen table, the wooden box containing Eleanor's devastating secret resting in front of me. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. The contents were burned into my memory. My phone felt heavy in my hand, a tool I hadn't wanted to touch for weeks. I scrolled through my contacts, past names of friends I hadn't spoken to, and stopped at Ellie Hayes, attorney. My thumb hovered over the call button. There was no hesitation, no tremor in my hand. The man who had sat broken in his attic yesterday was gone. In his place was a man who had nothing left to lose, and therefore everything to fight for. The phone rang twice before she answered, her voice professional and alert, even at this early hour. "Ellie, it's Arthur Vance," I said. My voice didn't crack. It was steady, the voice of a man giving an order, not making a request. "I need you. I need you to file an immediate injunction to freeze every asset, every account, every single penny tied to my name. And I need you to launch a full investigation into the sale of my farm to a company called Westfield Development Corporation. Find out who signed, who authorized it, and where the money went. I want everything. Immediately." There was a brief pause on the other end, then Ellie's voice, sharp and focused. "Arthur, what's happened? Are you all right?" I took a slow sip of coffee. "I'm better than all right, Ellie. I'm finally seeing clearly. The simple act of giving that command, of taking the first concrete step, was like a jolt of electricity. A sense of control, something I thought I'd lost forever, began to seep back into my veins. They thought they had left me powerless. They were about to learn that a cornered man is the most dangerous man of all. Later that afternoon, a sleek, black BMW pulled into my driveway, a car far too expensive for a regional sales manager. Kevin and Brittany stepped out, dressed in their Sunday best, their faces a carefully constructed mask of concern. They walked into my kitchen, Brittany carrying a basket of muffins that looked like they'd been purchased from a gourmet bakery, a pathetic peace offering. "Dad, we were so worried," Kevin began, his voice dripping with false sincerity. "We've been calling. You haven't been answering." I just looked at him, my expression unreadable. I let the silence hang in the air. Brittany placed the muffins on the counter, her eyes darting around the room, assessing, calculating. "You look tired, Dad," she said, her voice soft and cloying. "We were thinking, maybe it's time to consider some options, to make things easier for you. We even drew up some spreadsheets, some plans for the future." She gestured toward the expensive leather briefcase Kevin was holding. Spreadsheets, plans. My future, laid out in neat columns and rows by the very people who had tried to erase it. I remained silent. I let them talk. I let them dig their own graves with their lies and their condescending sympathy. I saw the greed flickering behind their worried eyes. I saw the impatience in the way Kevin tapped his fingers on the briefcase. They weren't here to check on me. They were here to push their agenda, to finish the job they had started. They saw a frail old man weakened by grief and illness, an easy mark to be manipulated. They had no idea they were walking into a trap. While they were laying out their vision for my comfortable future in an assisted living facility, my phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number, but I answered it. "Mr. Vance? This is Sarah from the First National Bank. I'm just calling to follow up on our conversation from this morning. The accounts have been secured as you requested. And, sir, I just wanted to say I'm so very sorry for your loss. My grandmother thought the world of Mrs. Vance." Her voice was kind, genuinely kind. The simple human decency from a complete stranger was a stark, painful contrast to the cold-blooded calculation sitting right in front of me. It was like a splash of ice water, hardening my resolve even further. They were not my family. Not anymore. I hung up the phone and looked at them, a faint, cold smile touching my lips for the first time. "Spreadsheets, you say?" I asked. "Show me what you've got." They took my quiet curiosity as a sign of weakening, a crack in the armor. Kevin eagerly unzipped his briefcase and laid out a series of glossy presentations on my kitchen table. There were charts, graphs, and projections, all detailing the financial benefits of selling off the rest of my assets and moving into the finest retirement community in the state. He spoke with the slick confidence of a practiced salesman, pointing out investment returns and long-term care costs. Brittany chimed in with soft, supportive murmurs about peace of mind and not having to worry about anything anymore. They were so engrossed in their performance, they didn't notice the coldness in my eyes. They didn't see that I wasn't listening to their words, but watching their faces, their gestures, memorizing this final, grotesque display of their true nature. They thought they were closing a deal. They had no idea they were confessing. In the middle of Kevin's speech about property taxes, Brittany reached into her purse. "And Dad," she said, pulling out a small framed photo, "we found this while we were sorting through some of Mom's things. We thought you'd want to have it." It was a picture of Eleanor and a very young Kevin, taken at the county fair. She was holding up a blue ribbon he had won. It was a transparent, cynical attempt to manipulate me, to use my love for Eleanor against me. They were weaponizing my own memories. The audacity of it was breathtaking. I looked at the photograph, then back at them. "She loved you so much," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "She would have done anything for you." For a moment, a flicker of something, maybe guilt, crossed Kevin's face. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced by that familiar, greedy resolve. This was who he was. This was what they were. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. They weren't just misguided. They were morally bankrupt. My love for them, the lifetime of sacrifice, it meant nothing. It was just an obstacle they had finally overcome. If you believe that true character is revealed under pressure, comment the word truth below. The performance continued, but my mind was elsewhere. I was no longer a participant. I was a spectator, watching the final, tragic act of a play I never knew I was a part of. The call from Ellie came late that evening, long after they had gone, leaving their glossy presentations and their gourmet muffins behind. "Arthur, I have something," she said, her voice tight. "It's worse than we thought. I ran a background check, dug into some public records. Kevin isn't just in a little trouble. He's drowning." She explained that his so-called investments were nothing more than high-risk gambles. He owed over $200,000 to a casino in Atlantic City. They had started making calls, threatening legal action. He wasn't just greedy. He was desperate. Desperate people do desperate things. The sale of the farm wasn't about funding a luxury lifestyle. It was about saving his own skin. He had sold my legacy to pay off his vices. The pieces of the puzzle clicked into place, forming a picture of deceit so profound it stole my breath. This wasn't a sudden lapse in judgment. It was a calculated act of survival, with my life's work as the collateral. Ellie continued, "And Arthur, there's more." While looking into his financial records, I cross-referenced some public databases. It seems he has a record. A sealed juvenile record from when he was 17. Shoplifting. It was minor, expunged when he turned 18, but it's there. A pattern of behavior. A pattern. The word hung in the air. This wasn't the first time he had taken something that didn't belong to him. It was just the first time the stakes were this high. I felt a chill run down my spine. The boy I had raised, the man I thought I knew, was a stranger with a history of theft and a mountain of debt. This information was the final piece I needed. It was the ace up my sleeve. The secret he thought was buried forever was about to be unearthed. They had come to my house with their spreadsheets and their lies, thinking they held all the cards. They had no idea that I was holding a hand that would not just win the game, but burn the whole table down. "Ellie," I said, my voice calm and steady, a stark contrast to the storm raging inside me. "Set up a family meeting, here, at the farm. This weekend, tell them I'm ready to discuss my future. It's time to put an end to this charade." They were coming back to the farm one last time, but they wouldn't be coming to claim their inheritance. They would be coming to face their judgment. The game was set, the players were in position, and they had no idea that the confused old man they thought they could control was about to checkmate them. If you're still watching and find this story interesting, please comment 2 below to let me know you're here with me. The day of the meeting arrived with a heavy gray sky that mirrored the weight in my chest. I had Ellie come over an hour early. We sat in the living room, the same room where I had felt so utterly broken just days before. Now, it felt different. It felt like a stage, prepared for its final dramatic scene. Ellie arranged her files neatly on the coffee table, a picture of calm professionalism. I, on the other hand, felt a strange sense of detachment, as if I were watching a movie of someone else's life. The grandfather clock ticked its steady rhythm, a metronome counting down to the inevitable confrontation. Kevin and Brittany arrived precisely on time, their confidence radiating off them like a cheap cologne. Kevin carried his leather briefcase, the one filled with his plans for my future. Brittany had a tight, predatory smile plastered on her face. They sat on the sofa opposite me, their bodies angled towards me, like wolves closing in on their prey. They thought this was their moment of victory, the final push to secure their prize. They had no idea they were lambs walking to the slaughter. "Thank you for coming," I began, my voice even and calm, betraying none of the turmoil inside. "We have a lot to discuss about the future." Kevin leaned forward, a look of patronizing concern on his face. "Of course, Dad. We're here for you. Whatever you need." Just as he spoke, the doorbell rang. A look of confusion flickered across his face. He wasn't expecting anyone else. I had asked my oldest friend and neighbor, Frank Miller, to stop by. He walked in, his face etched with genuine concern. "Arthur, sorry to interrupt," he said, his voice booming in the tense silence. "Just wanted to see how you were holding up. Heard you were back on your feet. You're looking sharp as a tack, old friend. The town council was just saying the other day how clear-headed you were in your call with them about the property line dispute." Frank's words, seemingly casual, were a perfectly aimed dart. They established my lucidity, my engagement with current affairs, dismantling their narrative of a confused old man before they could even begin. Brittany's smile tightened at the edges. This wasn't part of their plan. With my allies in place, the true proceedings could begin. I let Frank settle into a chair beside me, a silent, steady presence. "Kevin," I started, my eyes locking onto his. "Let's begin with the farm. You sold it for $1.2 million. A quick sale, you said, for market value." Ellie slid a folder across the table. "This," I said, my voice flat, "is a certified appraisal of the property, conducted just 6 months ago for estate planning purposes. The value is listed at $3.8 million. That's a discrepancy of $2.6 million. Can you explain that?" Kevin's confident demeanor faltered. He sputtered about market fluctuations, about the need for a quick liquidation. His excuses were weak, pathetic. I let him stumble, his lies unraveling in the thick silence of the room. "Or perhaps," I continued, my voice dropping lower, "the urgency wasn't about the market at all. Perhaps it was about a more personal financial crisis." Ellie slid another document across the table. "This is a statement from an account in Atlantic City. It shows an outstanding debt of over $200,000. Your name is on it, Kevin. Was this the real reason you needed to liquidate my life's work so quickly? To cover your gambling debts?" Brittany gasped, her head whipping around to stare at Kevin. "Gambling? What gambling debt? You told me that money was an investment." The first crack in their united front appeared. The foundation of their partnership, built on shared greed, was beginning to crumble under the weight of individual secrets. Kevin's face was pale, with a thin sheen of sweat on his forehead. He was trapped, but the worst was yet to come. He still thought this was just about money. He had no idea how deep this rabbit hole went. He was so focused on the financial trap, he didn't see the existential one waiting to spring. Ellie took her cue, her voice cutting through the tension like a surgeon's scalpel. "Mr. Vance," she said, addressing Kevin formally, "while we're on the subject of the farm sale, there's another detail you might find interesting. The purchasing entity, Westfield Development Corporation. It's not some faceless conglomerate." She paused for effect, letting the weight of her words settle. It is, in fact, a wholly owned subsidiary of a company called Agritech Innovations. She pushed a thick portfolio of corporate filings toward him, and the majority shareholder, the controlling owner with a 73% stake in Agritech, is your father, Arthur Vance. The color drained from Kevin's face. He looked from the documents to me, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. "No," he whispered. "No, that's impossible. You're a farmer." "I am a farmer," I said, my voice resonating with the weight of a 40-year secret. "I am also the founder and CEO of a $485 million agricultural technology empire. You didn't just sell my farm at a discount, Kevin. You sold my farm back to me." The shock in the room was palpable. Brittany looked like she had seen a ghost. Frank Miller let out a low whistle. The entire narrative they had built, the foundation of their contempt for me, had been obliterated in a single, stunning revelation. I was not the poor, simple old man they had so easily dismissed. Seeing the total collapse on his face, the utter ruin of his arrogance, I didn't feel the triumph I expected. Instead, a profound sadness washed over me. Sadness for the man he could have been. Sadness for the secrets Eleanor felt she had to keep. The feeling of being so profoundly misjudged and underestimated by the one person you poured your life into is a lonely, hollow place. If you believe every person deserves to be seen for who they truly are, not who others assume them to be, comment the word respect below. In his panic, backed into a corner with his lies and his debts exposed, Kevin did the only thing he had left to do. He played the son card. "Dad," he pleaded, his voice cracking with desperation. "Please, I made a mistake, a terrible mistake. But I'm your son. I'm your family. You can't do this to your own flesh and blood." His words, meant to be a lifeline, were the final trigger. Flesh and blood. The hypocrisy was too much to bear. I looked at him, my expression hardening into something he had never seen before. "On that subject, Kevin," I said, my voice cold and deliberate. I reached down and picked up the small wooden box from the floor beside my chair. I placed it on the coffee table with a soft, definitive thud. "Before you talk to me about family, about flesh and blood, I think you need to read this." I pushed the box toward him. His eyes, wide with fear and confusion, darted from the box to my face. With trembling hands, he lifted the lid. He saw the yellowed envelope, the official-looking document. He picked up the letter first, his eyes scanning the elegant script. I watched as every ounce of color drained from his face. I saw the moment the words registered, the moment his entire world, his entire identity, shattered. His hands began to shake uncontrollably, the letter fluttering to the floor. He stared at me, his eyes filled with a horror that went beyond the loss of money or the exposure of lies. It was the horror of a man who had just discovered his entire life was a fraud. He was not my son. The foundation upon which he had built his entitlement, his arrogance, his very being, had just turned to dust beneath his feet. The room erupted. Brittany shrieked, a sound of pure, animalistic fury. "What is that? What does it say?" She lunged for the letter on the floor, but Kevin was faster. He scrambled to his feet, his face a mask of desperation. "It's nothing!" he yelled. "It's a lie. He's a confused old man. He's making it all up." But his panic betrayed him. Brittany turned on him, her carefully constructed facade crumbling away to reveal the vicious, greedy core beneath. "You told me he was your father!" she screamed, her voice shrill. "You told me this was our inheritance." Was that a lie, too? How much of this is a lie, Kevin? He turned on her, his own fear twisting into rage. "This is your fault," he spat. "You and your endless wanting. The trips, the cars, the house. If it wasn't for you, I wouldn't have been in this mess." They tore into each other, a whirlwind of accusations and recriminations. All the resentment, all the hidden truths of their shallow, transactional marriage came pouring out in a torrent of ugliness. They weren't a team. They were just two predators who had briefly allied to take down a common target, and now that the hunt had failed, they were turning on each other. I watched them, my heart a cold, heavy stone in my chest. This was the true consequence of their actions. Not just the loss of money, but the complete and utter destruction of the rotten foundation they had built their lives upon. When their venom was finally spent, they stood panting, glaring at each other across the room, strangers bound only by their shared ruin. It was then that Ellie spoke, her voice cutting through the wreckage. "In light of these revelations," she said, her tone icy, "and the clear evidence of fraudulent activity and bad faith, Mr. Vance has instructed me to execute his new and final will and testament." She produced a crisp legal document from her briefcase and a pen. I took it, my hand steady. I signed my name at the bottom with a firm, deliberate stroke. My entire estate, I announced to the silent room, including Agritech Innovations, this farm, and all associated assets, will be placed into a charitable trust. It will be called the Eleanor Vance Foundation, dedicated to providing scholarships and financial aid to the children of farming families. As for the two of you, you get nothing. You have no claim, no inheritance, nothing. I stood up, the meeting now officially over. "Get out of my house," I said, my voice leaving no room for argument. They looked at me, their faces a mixture of shock, hatred, and a dawning, terrible understanding of the finality of it all. They had gambled everything, and they had lost. They stumbled out of the front door, not speaking, not even looking at each other, two separate islands of failure. I watched them go, the sleek BMW that had arrived with such arrogance now looking like a hearse carrying away the remains of their future. Frank put a comforting hand on my shoulder. "You did the right thing, Arthur," he said softly. Ellie began gathering her papers. Her work here done. For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, a sense of peace began to settle over me. It wasn't the joy of victory. It was the quiet, profound relief of a storm that had finally passed. The house was mine again. The future was mine again. The long, difficult process of healing could now begin. If you're still watching and find this story interesting, please comment 3 below to let me know you're here with me. The weeks following that final, explosive meeting were a blur of legal paperwork and quiet resolutions. Ellie handled everything with a calm efficiency that I was deeply grateful for. The transfer of my entire $485 million estate, including Agritech Innovations and the farm itself, into the Eleanor Vance Foundation was finalized. The fraudulent sale Kevin had orchestrated was legally nullified, and the $1.2 million transaction was reversed. However, the $96,000 he and Brittany had already spent on their fantasy life in the Maldives became a personal debt, a legal judgment against them that would follow them for the rest of their lives. As expected, the financial house of cards they had built came crashing down. Faced with insurmountable debt and the public humiliation of their actions, they filed for bankruptcy. The sleek BMW was repossessed. Their gaudy, oversized house in the suburbs went into foreclosure. I heard through the grapevine that Brittany left Kevin within a month. Their alliance, forged in greed, was never meant to withstand the harsh realities of failure. She moved back in with her parents, her dreams of being a wealthy influencer turning to digital dust. Kevin, stripped of his job, his inheritance, and his wife, moved into a dingy one-bedroom apartment on the other side of town. The silence from them was absolute. Then, one day, a letter arrived. It was from Kevin. The handwriting was shaky, almost unrecognizable. It was a long, rambling apology, filled not with genuine remorse, but with self-pity. He wrote about his mistakes, his regrets, how he had been led astray. He never once took full responsibility. It was a coward's apology. I read it once, standing by the fireplace in the now empty living room. Then I folded it neatly and dropped it into the flames. I didn't need his excuses. I didn't need his late-stage regret. I needed peace. And I realized, watching the paper curl and blacken into ash, that his apology was not a required part of my healing. My peace would not be dependent on him. I didn't need their apologies. I had my life. The farm, however beautiful, held too many ghosts. Every corner, every field, was saturated with memories, some beautiful, some now unbearably painful. To truly move forward, I knew I had to leave. I worked with the new board of the foundation to transform the farm into something new, something that would honor Eleanor's memory in a way that was forward-looking. We established a residential program, a training center for young people from non-farming backgrounds who wanted to learn the trade. The old farmhouse became a dormitory. The barns became classrooms. The land, my family's legacy, would now be a place of opportunity for a new generation. I sold the contents of the house, keeping only a few personal mementos: my wedding photograph, Eleanor's favorite armchair, and my father's old woodworking tools. With the proceeds, I bought a small, two-bedroom house in a quiet neighborhood in town, a place with a small yard that backed onto a peaceful park. It cost $200,000, a modest sum, but it was all I needed. It was mine. For the first time in my life, I was living for myself. I started waking up not to the pressure of running a farm or a company, but to the simple question of what I wanted to do with my day. I found my old fishing rods in the garage and started spending my mornings at the lake. I set up my father's tools and began to woodwork again, the scent of sawdust filling the air, the simple, honest work of shaping wood with my hands a balm to my soul. I reconnected with old friends, joining them for their weekly poker game, something I hadn't done in years. I even joined the local community center, volunteering to mentor young entrepreneurs in the 4-H club, the very same club I had taken Kevin to as a boy. I found a new purpose, not in building an empire, but in building connections, in sharing the knowledge I had gathered over a lifetime. This was the true inheritance, not money, not property, but wisdom. One afternoon, while I was helping a young girl named Sarah plan the business model for her small organic vegetable stand, I realized something profound. For years, I had poured all my energy, all my resources into one person, hoping to mold him into a success. I had confused love with a lack of boundaries. I see now that the greatest lesson this ordeal taught me is for parents. We love our children, and we want to give them the world. But love without teaching them the value of work, of respect, of earning their own way, isn't love. It's enablement. We have a duty not just to provide for them, but to prepare them for the world, to instill in them a character that can withstand its tests. The second lesson is for the children. Gratitude is not a passive feeling. It's an active practice. To see the sacrifices made for you, to honor them with your own hard work and integrity, that is the greatest gift you can give back. Kevin saw my life's work not as a gift to be cherished, but as a right to be claimed. He saw my sacrifices as his due. And in the end, that sense of entitlement cost him everything. Finally, this story taught me something about human nature in our modern world. In an age of instant gratification and curated online lives, it's easy to mistake the appearance of success for the real thing. But character, true character, is what you are in the dark. It's the choices you make when no one is watching. Kevin and Brittany were obsessed with the image of wealth, but they lacked the substance of real worth. Their downfall wasn't a lack of money. It was a lack of character. That is the one currency you can never fake, and the only asset that no one can ever take away from you. My life now is quiet, but it is full. The silence in my new home is not the heavy, oppressive silence of the farm. It's a peaceful silence, filled with the gentle hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of children playing in the park. My days are my own, structured around small joys: a good cup of coffee, a successful catch at the lake, the satisfaction of a perfectly joined piece of wood. The foundation is thriving, and I get letters every month from the young students at the farm telling me about their hopes and their dreams. I am building a new legacy, one based not on bloodlines, but on shared values and community. One day, I was sitting on a park bench, reading a book, when a little girl, no older than 5, toddled over to me. She was holding a fistful of dandelions. She stopped in front of me, looked me right in the eye, and held one out. "For you," she said, with all the solemnity a 5-year-old can muster. I took the small, yellow flower from her. "Thank you," I said, my voice a little thick. "It's beautiful." She gave me a sunny, gap-toothed smile and then ran back to her mother. It was a small gesture, a fleeting moment with a stranger. But in that moment, I felt a profound sense of connection, a confirmation that there is still so much simple goodness in the world, waiting to be found when you open yourself up to it. I chose to step out of the darkness of betrayal and back into the light, and the world, in its own small, beautiful way, welcomed me back. I learned that family isn't always about the blood you share. It's about the respect you give, the trust you earn, and the love you choose to build. This long, painful journey has taught me many things, but the most important lesson is this: what we have is not nearly as important as who we are. Life has given me a second chance, a chance to live authentically, to find peace not in revenge, but in rebuilding. Which of these lessons resonates most with you in your own life? Let me know in the comments below. The story has come to an end. I hope it has brought you valuable lessons and insights. If you enjoyed this content, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next video. Goodbye, and see you again.